Hi, my name is Ilya Risky. I'm here from Arizona. I'm a Maxwell grad of 2008 MPA class. I work for the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting. Acronym for that is OSPB. We are the state's executive budget office. And
yeah, I'm Ken Matthews. I graduated from here in '09, and I work at OSPB as a senior analyst. Been working there for about 2 years now. It's been a great place. I enjoy it a lot, so I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit more about our office and what we have and why it's a great place to work.
yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about Phoenix as well, and kind of lifestyle in Phoenix, office culture, and kind of a general overview of what it's like working at OSPB. So we wanted to start today with the weather. That basically speaks for itself.
Which picture do you choose?
We could, yeah, I mean, I guess we could just stop the presentation here and
Right.
So I'm done.
call it
So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
82 degrees in Phoenix.
right.
Yeah.
No, the weather obviously is pretty good in Phoenix at this time of year. In the summertime, it gets pretty warm, but right now is when we get the payoff for all that. So, there we go.
All right, so before we really get into the nuts and bolts of the office, we wanted to give you a little picture of kind of the lifestyle and some of the things, entertainment and cultural activities around the Phoenix area. I know for me, one of the things that's really important is the sports culture. I know here you got SU basketball, and that's kind of the game in town, but in Phoenix you have a lot of professional sports teams, a lot of great venues. You have the Suns, the Cardinals, the Coyotes, the Diamondbacks. You got a lot of great opportunities if you're a sports fan. Not only that, but in about a week, spring training is going to be starting. I think 16 of the major league teams play all over the valley in different fields around there. You can pick up tickets for really cheap, watch baseball. It's a great time of year there. Also, you have golf tournaments, Phoenix Open. Tons of opportunities to golf. There's over 250 courses in the area. The Super Bowl is coming next year, and the Fiesta Bowl is there every year. It's pretty neat. And one of the really neat things is you kind of start to get to know people, and you kind of have a network, and people will just kind of call you the day or two before, hey, you want to go to the Fiesta Bowl? And you can go. You know, for other people, it's like you travel across the country, but when you're living there, you're really accessible to these events. So it's pretty neat.
In addition to sports, plenty of cultural activities in Arizona. This is a photo of a Dia de los Muertos parade. Day of the Dead festival is the day after Halloween every year. There's a bunch of other festivals throughout the spring season and the winter season, because that's the nice season where everybody tries to be outside as much as possible. We've got lots of great museums. We have the Musical Instrument Museum in Scottsdale, which is the only museum of its kind in the world, with musical instruments from all over the world, as well as each city in the greater Phoenix area has its own art museum and theaters. Plenty of live music. The top four that are in most cities: ballet, symphony, opera, and theater. In addition to that, there's several car shows right now, or pretty close to now. The Barrett-Jackson auto auction is going to happen, or maybe it's already happened.
I think it happened a couple weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago. And lots of fantastic restaurants if you were into the foodie culture as well.
Lots of outdoor activities. There's hiking. The largest municipal park in the country is located right in Phoenix. It's called South Mountain Park. There's literally miles and miles of hiking, minutes away from downtown. There's cycling. There's a canal system with lots of paved canalways. You can run, bike, hike on those. There's skiing, rafting, rock climbing, camping. It's just a generally great place to do outdoor activities all year round. Just a couple weeks ago, I went out hiking in shorts and a t-shirt, and it was beautiful.
We can too. You're just so cold.
And there's lots of great day trips you can take to the Grand Canyon, to Sedona, Havasupai Canyon, this picture right before. This is a photo of Havasupai Canyon, Karchner Caverns, and Painted Desert, and this is a photo of Monument Valley. It's all very unique terrain, especially coming from this side of the country. I remember when I drove out to come to Maxwell, after I left about the middle of New Mexico, I realized, oh, everything else looks pretty much the same from the plains over. I mean, there's maybe more hills when you get close to the Appalachians, but nothing really looks like the Southwest.
Let's talk about road trips. You're really close to a lot of places that maybe you haven't visited, or maybe you have, and you just want closer access. About 5 to 6 hours away from LA, 4 hours from Vegas, 7 hours from San Diego, although I did it in about 4.5 last weekend, so I don't know what that's saying. You're very close to some beautiful sites in Mexico, Ensenada, and Puerto Peñasco, which is right on the Sea of Cortez.
Sea of Cortez,
Just
yeah.
about 5 hours away. Beautiful beach area, so a lot of opportunities for short day trips to places that are beautiful.
And Phoenix cost of living is pretty cheap comparatively. So when you're thinking about your next step in your first job, you should also be thinking about what the cost of living is in the city, and I'm sure everybody who takes this course is already thinking about that. But we wanted to highlight that Phoenix, median home price for Phoenix is $161,000 compared to Portland, $288,000, Boston, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Fairfax, L.A., all more than $400,000. That photo there is a picture of my house. I just bought a house, very happy with it, and I did not break the bank to purchase a house. Whereas if you go to D.C. and go federal or stay on the East Coast, it's tougher.
All right, so let's get into a little bit more about OSPB as an office. This slide really illustrates where OSPB stands in the scheme of things. OSPB is really the equivalent to the federal OMB. So we report directly to the executive, so we'd be the executive's budget office. This is in contrast to our counterpart over at the legislature, which in Arizona is called JLBC, which is a lot like the CBO.
Right, JLBC stands for Joint Legislative Budget
Yes,
Committee.
thank you. And so at OSPB, you'd be working for the executive in the executive budget office.
Mm-hmm. And there are currently 2 Maxwell grads at OSPB, myself and Ken, and 1 Maxwell grad at JLBC, Matt Gress, who graduated, I think, last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he interviewed at both offices, but JLBC was the one that picked him up.
They said that you weren't
We didn't say that. There's
did not
no
happen.
enemies.
we love all analysts.
That's right.
Kumbaya.
Kumbaya. So what OSPB does is advises the governor, state agencies, and legislature on financial matters. We develop the budget office, we develop the executive budget, and then we present the executive budget to legislators. We participate in negotiation of appropriations with legislative leadership on behalf of the governor. And we instruct and assist state agencies in budget development and execution. What else we got?
We also analyze all legislation for fiscal and operational impacts. So this time of year, now that session started, we go through all the bills. We'll get into that a little bit more detail later. We also conduct research on topics affecting state issues and taxpayers, and we make presentations to public groups about state finances and operations. Just a couple weeks ago, an analyst from our office went and presented to a group of cities, 4 or 5 cities in the West Valley of Phoenix on the budget. We'll do things like that from time to time, and that might be something you'd be expected to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite frequently. Our director will have conflicts of his schedule, and he'll send one of us to go and deliver a presentation on the budget to go over go over the budget and what's happening with state finances with different public groups. As well as we do press conference, we do one press conference a year or public, I guess we don't do the press conference, John does that.
But it's like
But we
what is it,
do
public
yeah,
presentation?
stakeholders presentation that we present to, we presented to the cabinet this year
Mhm.
as well.
Yep.
So lots of opportunities to improve on your public speaking and communicate directly with the public. In addition, we evaluate and make recommendations regarding fees charged by state agencies. This is a little nuts and boltsy, but one of the things we do as analysts is, well, let me start by talking about the recession. During the recession, there was a lot of pressure on state government to reduce general fund expenditures and transfer general fund expenditures to other funds. So one of my agencies, the agencies that I kind of manage, is called the Department of Environmental Quality, and what they do is manage grants and run all the environmental programs for the state, and a lot of money from EPA goes through DEQ. During the recession, we moved them off of general fund and onto a more fee-based structure for funding. And it was our job to review these fees, to explain everything to the governor and the legislature on how we were going to do that, develop a proposal, work with stakeholder groups who were going to be charged these fees, and explain how the new system was going to operate. And then over the past few years, we've been implementing that. So as an example of how you can work directly with state agencies, stakeholder groups, and elected officials. In addition, we define state programs, coordinate development of agencies' strategic and operational plans. Right now, we're separating out, one of my other agencies is Department of Economic Security, which is it's the state's welfare umbrella agency. So we have food stamps, unemployment insurance, or unemployment benefits, and child protective services, as well as an array of other welfare agencies. In the governor's recommendation this year, we recommended to separate child protective services out of the Department of Economic Security so that there could be more transparency, and it could be a standalone agency and a cabinet level agency as well, so that there would be a more direct line of communication between that agency and the governor's office. So over the past few weeks, past few months actually, we've been going through the process of trying to figure out how to do that, because DES is a multi-billion-dollar agency, and separating out a $680 million piece of that is very complicated, both in terms of policy and in terms of operational nuts and bolts.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, we publish a comprehensive list of all state programs and performance measures in the master list of state programs, and conduct program evaluations. So what that means is we take a look at all the deliverables that agencies provide to the state, review them. If there's a jump in productivity or a drop in productivity, we need to look at what the source of that is and explain that to our superiors. And if there needs to be a change, then we recommend changes.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the structure of the office. Our boss is the state budget director, and he is actually one of 5 of the governor's senior staff. And so he's responsible for the overall development of the executive budget and the execution of the budgets, and really he's responsible, in our office, is responsible for the financial stability of the entire state. I think the key takeaway here is that there's very few layers between you and the governor. And the access that you have really right out of the gate is pretty much unprecedented. You have a direct connection between your level as an analyst and the governor. And I know that's something that's really appealed to me in this office, just the ability you have to present to the governor, to affect policy, and things like that.
Yeah, my first week, so after I finished here, as you all will in late June, early July, I didn't have anything lined up right out of the gate, so I went and volunteered at a few nonprofits around Phoenix, because I moved back to Phoenix, because I'm from Phoenix. And One of my jobs was I worked at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, and what we were doing was knocking down walls and building up walls to hang art on, basically. So hanging drywall and doing a lot of manual labor, which was fine. I loved it, but not really a career path that I had chosen after finishing at Maxwell. So when I got the job at OSPB, I went in, and the first week I was there was pretty much the beginning of the recession. And I think it was the third or fourth day, I went up to the governor's floor and sat in one of her protocol rooms with the chief of staff and with the director of the Department of Economic Security and their chief of staff. And they were told that they had to cut $60 million out of their budget, which in the sense of the multi-billion-dollar budget is not huge, but it's still a huge chunk, and that meant a lot of layoffs and a lot of cuts in services. So we went back down after the meeting was done, and my supervisor came into my office and he said, "Well, so that was your first big meeting. What'd you think?" And I said, "I was hanging drywall last week. This is crazy." So the amount of contact you have with policymakers right out of the gate is pretty dramatic, and it's pretty exciting, I think.
No, it is. I agree.
Here is this slide just describes our structure. At the top is the director, so that's John Arnold. Below that, there are two assistant directors, and they're kind of the team managers. Directly below each of them are budget and project managers. And then, oh, here we go. Depending upon the team, your policy areas would be different, but these are pretty fluid and change around quite a bit. But we all start right here as budget analysts and move up. Both Ken and I are senior analysts. I've been with the office for 5 years, non-consecutively, which is strange. Normally people either move up and out after that. It's not that I'm stupid. I took about a year sabbatical and moved to Bangladesh with my girlfriend and worked at a small university there for a little while, and then came back. And when I came back, I called to see if I could have my job back, and they welcomed me back.
Yeah. And I guess just to give a little perspective,
sure.
I've only been with the office for about 2 years, and I'm a senior analyst. So really, you learn very quickly, you're immersed very quickly, and it doesn't take long to get that bump moving up, and being ready for something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially now that the recession is kind of finished, hopefully, things are moving a lot smoother and a lot more quickly again.
Right.
Whereas when I started also, nobody was leaving their job, so there was nowhere to really move up to, because everybody was either terrified or not hiring. So, and this kind of leads into that.
Yeah, exactly. So this kind of explains what I was just saying. You'd start out in the office as an analyst. As people leave and as you gain experience, you would become a senior analyst. And that's kind of the neat thing from my perspective about this office is once you become a senior analyst, you're really in a great position to move directly into management at either a state agency or a city and county. The way our boss, our director, really approaches this job is this is a great training ground to become a capable manager in the public sector. And I think I can pretty confidently say that this is the best or one of the best ways to get that initial experience to break into that.
Oh, absolutely.
You get a high-level picture of the way state government runs in general, the way government runs in general, the way money flows through government, and I don't think there's another place than a budget office that you could really get that.
That's true. Yeah, and we work frequently with the directors of agencies, with state comptroller, with governor's senior staff, with legislative senior staff as well.
Yeah.
Last week I was in a committee, and the comptrollers actually came in and sat next to me in committee and was commenting on all the legislation that we were watching go through committee, which was pretty fascinating. Just to get his perspective of it, because we all like all of the analysts in all of our office know what we all basically think about different bills and how we look at things, but then seeing his perspective on how different legislation would affect the operational impact, or what operational impact the different legislation would have. I want to go back just once here to the structure. So this year is an election year. It's a gubernatorial election year in Arizona. So what that means for the structure is that after the new governor is elected, the director will probably change, especially if the party changes. Currently, there's a Republican governor, so if the Democrat is elected, because the director is a political appointee, well, technically we're all political hires.
Technically, yeah.
But because there's so much institutional knowledge in the rest of the office, traditionally all of the analysts aren't fired if the party changes or if the governor changes, because that would mean they would have to rehire all the staff, retrain all the staff, which is, like I said, you don't want to really get rid of all that institutional knowledge.
Yeah, and actually that was one of the questions I had for my director when I first got hired. I'm like, if something happens, will I get fired? And he flat out told me no. So
Yeah.
it's not guaranteed, but it's highly
Right,
unlikely
right.
that anything like that would happen in a change.
Right.
So.
And this slide just shows some of the OSPB alumni. As you can see, there's a lot of directors up there. Our current director started out as a budget analyst in our office, I think 15, 20 years ago.
15 years ago, yeah.
Arizona Medicaid, CFO and director, Ohio Medicaid director, School Facilities Board, Department of Transportation, as well as Maricopa County, it's the county that Phoenix is in. Deputy Treasurer, that's an analyst that he just left, I don't know, 6 months
Last summer,
ago?
Yeah, 6, 8 months ago.
And now he's the Deputy Treasurer over there. So you can really go anywhere in state government, really, and lots of different cities and counties have opportunities as well. And with Arizona, with the Phoenix area, there's like 10 different cities and towns in the Phoenix area and lots of opportunities as well.
Absolutely. Just as far as benefits goes, it's a great benefit package. You get 21 vacation days a year, plus 12 sick days. They carry over from year to year, plus 10 paid state holidays. So you really got plenty of time off. Of course, you work hard, but at the same time, you get a great chance to take vacation and enjoy that. You get a defined benefit retirement plan, great health, dental benefits, and a tax-deferred compensation plan. And just as a note, the benefits start on day one as soon as you're hired. I know that was something about a year and a half ago we changed. We had a 90-day waiting period, but now benefits start immediately, which I think is a plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's rare that you're going to find another entry-level position with 4 weeks vacation right off the bat. Just want to highlight that because that's one of my favorite things about this job is that I have 4 weeks off every year, and it's awesome. Another great thing about OSPB is that there's a really friendly staff. We're all roughly in the same age bracket, all the analysts. Very collegial atmosphere. As I mentioned, 3 of the 12 total staff are Syracuse grads. We're a little understaffed at the moment because as the economy's picked up, other agencies are hiring because people are starting to move around a lot again. Lots of talented, highly educated coworkers. Not to toot our own horns, but
But it's true. Come on.
right. You guys should know. Lots of supportive former staff. So all across state government, as Ken mentioned, OSPB and JLBC are both seen as training grounds for state government. So once analysts leave, they tend to stay in state government and city and county government if they want. And you'll often, like one of your agencies that you kind of cover, there's a good chance that somebody over there has been at OSPB. And so when you call and talk to a former OSPB analyst and now a budget manager or CFO or director, they're going to know more about how to answer your questions accurately than other non-former budget staff would be, which is really good to start out with as well. At OSPB, we do a lot of independent work with moderate supervision. You're given a pretty long leash, I think, in terms of your own work, as long as you're able to complete it and you're efficient, and everybody kind of does their own thing. And we have weekly staff meetings to make sure we're all on the same page. And, workload and tasks vary greatly. I'll go through my workload, and then maybe you go through your workload, and just to give you an illustration. So the way state government's broken out is that we have the executive branch, right, and all of the governor's agencies below her. And each analyst is given, the office divides out all of the agencies between all of the analysts. So my responsibilities are the Department of Economic Security, which is the state welfare agency, as I mentioned, Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Transportation, Treasurer's Office, the Attorney General. I have a handful of other smaller state agencies. A few of my other responsibilities are I do tobacco tax forecasting. I used to do some Medicaid forecasting as well, some Medicaid member months forecasting. And I also am the office's local government liaison. So I have to manage and monitor all the legislation that's pertaining to those agencies. And that's quite a heavy load, actually. Possibly unmanageable, but as I mentioned, we're kind of short-staffed at the moment, so I'm handling a lot as I'm one of the senior analysts as well. And then Ken's workload is much different than mine.
Right. So I have the Department of Administration, and in Arizona, that's really all of the state's centralized services, so HR, benefits, the state's IT group, risk, procurement, fleet, capital, general services. It's kind of all the nuts and bolts kind of things of state government. I think I really like it. Maybe I'm weird, but it really gives you a great picture of how state government works inside and out. So one thing I really enjoy is kind of being a central point for the office on HR issues or compensation issues, or what are we doing with this building, or what's going on here. So I do a lot of the, I guess, nuts and bolts, do rent analysis, risk management analysis. I do HR reporting, personnel reporting, a lot of those kind of functions for our office, which I really enjoy. And I also have the Department of Insurance and a handful, about 13 other small agencies. So I think that kind of leads into the fact that there's probably something for you at OSPB as far as your interests. Every summer, our director comes around and he interviews you to try to get an idea of which agencies you might want in the future based on kind of your policy interests. And I think he does a pretty good job of matching your policy interests to what agencies you get. So for example, some of the policy areas we might cover would be economic and revenue forecasting, public safety and transportation, of course education.
Which is both K-12 and universities, higher ed.
Yeah. Health and Human Services, which would be the Department of Health Services in Arizona. Natural Resources, which there's several agencies, Game and Fish, Land, DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. Capital, which is managing the state's massive infrastructure. Debt, local government, and then IT and management systems, which actually has become a focus for the state of Arizona in the last couple of years as we try to move forward into the 21st century. And that's something I'm keenly focused on.
The state's accounting system was 20 years old?
20 plus years old, yeah.
It wasn't a DOS system, but it was similar to DOS.
It's
so we're in the process of upgrading that. So it's been much needed. And I haven't been in any of those meetings, but I think
I've been in a few.
few.
It's a pretty massive undertaking to replace the entire state accounting system, but it'll be good when it's done.
Right, and thinking strategically with your career in mind, from my experience, what I've done with this is for my first couple of years at OSPB, I would look around, because the first year you are given a number of agencies you really don't have much control over, unless you have specific experience in a few areas. If you're more of a generalist, they just give you, all right, here's 15 to 20 agencies. Most of them will be smaller, medium-sized. Over the years, I've kind of tailored my own policy areas to areas I'm interested in, such as Department of Environmental Quality and Department of Transportation. I specifically ask for those agencies because I would like to work for those agencies. So as you move through a few of the years as an OSPB analyst, I think it's wise to request agencies that you want to work at eventually, and make sure it's also a good way to see if you work well with the personalities at those agencies, and if you agree with the way, not the way they run the agency, but if you would get along in that culture at that office. As we've mentioned, as an analyst, you're an active player in Arizona government. Yeah, you have a lot of responsibility within the office because you're usually the only point of contact for, especially the smaller agencies, with the governor's office. Either you, well, there's also a policy analysts as well as budget analysts, but you will have more contact with all the smaller agencies and the medium-sized agencies, excuse me. You work face-to-face with legislators, governor's office staff, and agency directors. And you'll use the tools and knowledge gained here at Maxwell to solve problems, stimulate ideas, advocate positions, and initiate policies. And I really like this comic strip.
All right, and I think we've touched on this a little bit, but really as an analyst, you become a very valuable tool to your agencies, especially with your smaller agencies. It's amazing, some of these smaller boards and commissions, especially in Arizona, they have small staffs with relatively limited knowledge, and they will rely on you to help make a lot of pretty big decisions for their agency. Right out of the gate, I mean, your first or second week, regardless of if you're new or if you've been in it 5 years, you're going to be expected to kind of be their main resource, which may be a little daunting at first, but then you learn and you gain experience, and it's a great opportunity to really affect policy, to really help an agency improve and make better decisions. That's something I really love about it, is that you really feel like you're affecting and making change, and that you and your input really affects that agency and the people they serve, which is huge. Also, you anticipate problems, and you make or recommend corrective action. Sometimes the smaller boards and commissions might get into trouble every once in a while, do things they maybe shouldn't, and it's up to you. You can analyze cash flows, see if they're going to have a problem with payroll, things like that, and help them understand problems that they might run into before it happens.
Yeah, that's happened a couple times in the
Yeah,
time that I've been there. So you get a call and they say, we can't make payroll in 2 weeks. We need help. And you say, why didn't you call me 6 months ago? And then you figure it out and listen to your boss yell for a little bit. And then the next year you make sure to manage their cash flow statement a lot closer and
absolutely.
monitor them. And then walk them through all the different processes that we go through, which kind of leads into training agency budget personnel, which you do throughout the year, especially if there's problems. And as well in the summertime, we do a few training sessions for some of the smaller agencies and some of the newer budget staff at these agencies. I've given training sessions where I would have former analysts from JLBC, from our sister agency, in the audience, and I would ask, why are you here? You know how to budget. You're already working. And he would say, well, we know how to budget, but we don't have access to your system, so I need to learn how to use your software. And that was kind of a strange experience, but it was good. Provide critical analyses and recommendations. We also present briefing documents and position papers, much like the countless memos that I'm sure you're all writing and rewriting. Legislation tracking and assessments, and agency budget oversight. I think we've talked
Yeah.
a bit about that.
All right, so let's talk about the calendar a little bit. We operate under the fiscal year that starts July 1st through June 30th. And so what will happen, September 1st, agencies will submit budget information and strategic plans for the following fiscal year. So for example, last September, agencies submitted their budget submissions for fiscal year 15, which will start July 1st. Once you get that submission, it's up to you. You spend the next couple months going through their budgets that most of the time include requests for additional funding, and it's up to you to analyze those requests. And it's a very independent thing. I mean, it's up to the analyst as an individual to really make those recommendations, look at the requests, use tools you've learned, skills you've learned in school and other places to come up with recommendations. So you will be the single point of contact, the single person that makes recommendations on an agency's budget request. And we'll get into a little more of that, what that entails in a little bit.
Yeah, I think the most difficult part of the job is learning how, or just building your confidence in reviewing and making recommendations on budgets. Because when you come in, like when I came in, I really wasn't sure how much I should be doing in terms of developing the agency's budget for them in some cases, and how much digging I would have to do because, let's see, in some cases, agencies don't provide completed budget requests, but they might need the money. So what I mean by completed budget requests is they don't develop their arguments enough, or enough to get past your supervisor or past the governor, because after it gets past the governor, you're going to have to go defend it to the legislature. So what you have to do is you sit and work with the agency and say, okay, well, you say you need another $100,000. Do you really need $100,000? What's this for? How many staff do you need? Is this really what it costs? And then you cross-check that with other agencies and make a reasonable estimate, and then make sure to clear that with your boss. And in some cases, crazy stuff happens, like you'll get to your boss and he'll say, well, they asked for this the last 5 years in a row, and we haven't recommended it for the last 5 years because we don't think they need it. And there's no way that you could have known that because you're a first-year analyst and you don't know what the culture is at that office. And anyway, this is I think the most difficult thing to navigate is figuring out how to deal with agencies and what the relationship is between your office and other state agencies.
Also, feel free to jump in at any time.
Yeah,
and ask
absolutely.
questions. Sorry, this doesn't need to be us just
Yeah.
talking
Yeah, I
at
have
you.
a question.
Sure.
Since you guys are technically political appointees,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you ever feel any pressure to like, on the like making the budget numbers? I mean, 'cause it's not technically an independent office, right?
No, it's the executive budget office.
Yeah. I mean, is it pretty analytical?
It is. Our positions are. Our
Okay.
director is political.
Okay.
But that being said, he started as an analyst, and he's very reasonable and I don't really how to say this. Yeah, at his level, well, let me just back up. When we present our recommendations, we're really presenting options.
Okay.
So, and I'll walk through an example. What I do is I present, if I have an agency that requests additional funding, we look at that funding and look at what they're basing their request on, and then take that to the next level, take that to our assistant supervisor, and then we review that with him and make sure that he doesn't have any questions, and he kind of clears it for the next level to review it with the director. And really we're presenting options saying, okay, if you want to do this policy, this is what it's going to cost.
Okay.
And then they make that call.
And I think one good example, I have the Department of Insurance. They requested additional FTE employees because the Affordable Care Act. That's a hot button topic in Arizona,
Yep.
in most places. I looked at it on paper and said, yes, they need these. It makes sense. But when I brought it up to Director John, it got a little stickier. He's like, yes, I see that this makes sense on paper, but now it's up, we got to look at this politically.
Mhm.
And I think that's, things like that will happen. But at your level,
Yeah.
you're just looking at it analytically.
Does it feel like a comfortable environment for like people who have both ideologies, kind of like conservative? Are there any more like liberal leaning kind of, and how is that?
Well, kind of, I don't know, leading off of that answer, I mean, I think we're pretty agnostic in terms of what we do, because we don't have that power to make that call and say, okay, yes, this is the decision that our office would make, so this is what I'm recommending. But that being said, I'm registered as an independent.
As am I.
Yeah, and we try to stay. Most of the analysts, I think, would agree that we're all. I'm sorry if I'm not answering your question. Is that?
No, this is good because I mean, you think Arizona, you kind of have like a more
Right,
conservative
media
liberal-
portrays us in a very
Yeah,
very
so,
specific light.
concerned about like work environment and
Mhm.
like the differences of minds still being able to work together and like appreciate like what each other has to offer.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'd say our office is actually pretty diverse, and we all work together well.
That's true.
In that regard.
But it is currently in a Republican administration, so that does kind of bleed into everything,
Sure.
obviously. All right, so we're gonna. Does anybody have any other questions before I keep going? No? All right. Just gonna walk through an example of something we've been doing, walking through. As I mentioned, the Department of Child Protective Services being separated out from the other state welfare agency, or from the state welfare agency, Department of Economic Security at the moment. In the Department of Economic Security's request, CPS requested $12.6 million of general fund to increase their staff, to add 75 caseworkers for CPS, as well as 75 support staff. So another 150 staff. And in the context of this, they currently have about 1,200 caseworkers at the moment. So the question is, should this funding be recommended? So what we did was we took a look at what the caseload was. As you can see, 07, 08 through 10 and 11 it wasn't flat, but it was kind of hovering around 34,000. And then in 12 and 13, we saw a 16% increase and 8.9% increase. We really don't know why that happened. It's still kind of up in the air. Child care advocates would say it's because we stopped funding child care for low-income workers. They don't really have any information to back that assertion up. But logically, I could see how that would make sense. Regardless, what our office is faced with is this dramatic increase in CPS reports. Our forecast for 14 and 15 is just a 1% increase because we think this is going to level off, and we've looked at the first quarter and I guess the second quarter now, and we've seen negative growth year over year. So we think 1% is actually probably going to be a little high. But just to be safe, our budget request or budget recommendation took this into consideration. So clearly, over 13 or 12, 13 over 12, we can see that there's an increased, not demand, but increased need for more staff. In addition, there's 10,000 case backlog. 10,000 case backlog doesn't mean that these cases haven't been looked at. It means that these cases haven't been looked at for like 60 days. So there was an initial report, caseworker took a look at it, and then it's been not neglected, but just not looked at for at least 60 days. So it is an immediate problem. I'm not going to say it's not an immediate problem. In addition, the Department of Economic Security did a time study on what a caseworker can accomplish. And what this shows is the, the results of that time study. So one more layer of detail for this. Caseworkers work on 3 different things. They work on reports, they work on in-home care cases, and out-of-home care cases. In-home care cases are when a child is left in the home. Out-of-home care are cases where a child's pulled from a home because of either neglect or abuse. Currently, one caseworker can handle either, or is handling either 20 reports per month, or 39 cases per month per worker, or 28 cases per month. The time study that the Department of Economic Security did showed that a caseworker can actually only handle 13 reports, investigations per month, or 33 in-home care cases, or 20 out-of-home care cases. And until the agency reaches these standards here, the proposed standards, the backlog is going to grow. One more layer to this. Last year, the governor initiated the Office of Child Welfare Investigations, where we brought in an investigator from the Phoenix Police Department to start investigating cases where there has been criminal conduct. During their assessment of the backlog and all of the cases at CPS, they identified 6,500 cases that were not investigated, which was a massive scandal. Which is what the NI in brackets talks about. The NI indicates not investigated cases. As a result of the 6,500 cases not being investigated, there was a task force assigned, and we've gone through all of those 6,500 cases and had people have eyes on all of those and taken care of that. So our recommendation was, as you can, let's go back to their request quickly. They requested 75 new caseworkers plus 75 staff and 12.6 million. Our recommendation is 212 new caseworkers because we want to get to the recommended caseload so that we can fully staff for the caseload that we have. And let's just walk through this chart. Caseworkers currently, we have 912 case-carrying caseworkers. There are 213 caseworkers in training. What this means is these caseworkers who are in training can't carry cases, so they're not technically, they shouldn't technically be considered as able to manage any cases at the moment. And there are 70 caseworkers working at the hotline. We're recommending 126 new employees immediately, which was just passed a few weeks ago. the additional I think 5.5 million. And then another 86 caseworkers. The total 1,124 case-carrying caseworkers, 213 that are perpetually in training. There's a really high turnover rate, like 26, 27, 28%, perpetually, just always. And then 70 will stay at the hotline. So approximately, we're recommending a 23% increase in caseworkers. In addition, we're recommending 36 new supervisors, 6 assistant program managers, 54 case aides, and 24 support staff. So all in all, we're recommending 332 new staff members, which is way over and above what the agency recommended. And this is due to a lot of work on my behalf and my director's behalf. In addition to all this, our department, another crazy twist was that our analyst for the Department of Economic Security and CPS was hired away by American Express in November, about a week before the 6,500 not investigated cases were identified.
It was great
And-
timing, let me just say that.
Right. So I sat down with my boss about a week before that when Tim left, and he said, "We need you to take Department of Economic Security." And I said, okay, that's fine. And then this all happened, and I said, I need a lot of help. So, yeah.
Look into bringing back to the table the low-income bill to bring that back instead of hiring all these people, or the subsidy for childcare?
I haven't been in those conversations, but
Just because you mentioned that in the beginning.
Sure.
That
Well, that was
Do you know if
one
was
of
a discussion at all? I mean, as a way to solve this, I don't know.
I don't think that, not recently. I haven't heard anything. That doesn't mean it's not happening, obviously.
No, you just mentioned that at the beginning. that
Sure.
was
Well, I
part of
mentioned that at the
this,
beginning
yeah.
just as kind of context for,
Sure.
and I mean, the other part of that context was that we're coming out of the recession.
Right. So
That
maybe
I'm
it'll.
sure had an impact.
Right. Interesting.
Your boss was 100% behind the increase, the proposed increase that you made?
This increase?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, a little inside baseball, we took several options to the governor, and we presented the governor with several options, with several different staffing levels. And she said, we need to take care of this, we need to take care of it now, go all the way up. And let's just meet that case standard. Do you have another question?
No, not really,
Okay.
not yet. We'll probably in the future.
Right, so this just summarizes it. Fiscal 14, appropriate 5.6 million immediately to hire 192 staff. That's happening now. We're currently in negotiations with the legislature to finalize, well, not finalize, continue negotiating for the fiscal 15 budget. And this is part of it. This is part of our request or recommendation. And the goal, obviously, the recommendation will reduce caseload per caseworker. Yeah,
So you're dealing with the legislative budget office then?
that's correct.
Or are they contesting your numbers?
On this, you mean?
Yeah.
No, not necessarily, but they run, they do, yeah. They are the check and balance to our budget office, obviously, and we are to them too. So when they come out with their baseline book, which they do every year in January, at the same time we release the executive budget, we do a comparison of both reports and then present that to our boss. And then JLBC analysts do the same thing for their boss. And then our directors start talking, and the legislators get involved as well, and the governor and the chiefs of staff.
And eventually you get a budget. Sometimes it's June 30th.
Right. Yeah, another important part of this is that we have a part-time legislature. And what that means is They're in session, they're only supposed to be in session for 100 days, from mid to late January, usually through April.
Usually, but it's not statutorily regulated. so-
Right. In election years, however, the sessions have historically been a lot shorter because legislators want to get out to go and campaign. This year, I'm not sure what's going to happen. This is an election year. But
We had hopes, but it's not looking.
right. But as we're doing a lot of things this year, though, we're removing CPS from DES and creating its standalone agency, which is huge. We're establishing a new $680, $700 million agency, which just doesn't happen overnight. And it's probably going to take 2 or 3 years to fully separate it out. But that's something that needs to have legislation attached to it this session. So there's a lot of work going into that now and a lot of meetings that I have to go to and sit for 4 hours. But it's good. It's all work that absolutely needs to be done. And it's part of the exciting thing about working at OSPD is you get to be a part of those meetings. I mean, I don't often stand up and give my point of view on CPS because I've only had the agency for 3 or 4 months. But I need to be there and represent our office. And if there's an issue that our office needs to deal with, I have to take it back to my director and say, hey, Representative so-and-so said this. We need to check this out. What do you think about this? And he'll say, that's crazy talk, or I really agree with that. I think that should happen. And yeah, make sure that he's aware of everything.
All right, so I guess getting back into kind of the calendar, what we actually do. After September and October, once you've looked at your budgets, you've done some analysis, now it's time to review those analyses with your assistant director and the executive director, and then eventually the governor. You will, as an OSPB analyst, get an opportunity to brief the governor on your recommendations. I think I went up 3 times last fall to the governor to brief her on my recommendations. She liked some of them, and some of them she didn't. And that's one of the really neat things is the FaceTime you get with high-level people like the governor. We also finalize revenue estimates late in the fall, and then we compose the budget message and finalize the budget and policy issues. So what we'll do is we'll produce the executive budget, and then we'll also produce a smaller summary book, which really is, you've probably learned, I mean, a budget is inherently a political document.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will tailor that in the way we want, the way the director wants to portray how the budget is going to look for the public. One thing I wanted to mention is, and Ilya kind of touched on it, when we're going through and developing these recommendations, you're not always just taking what the agency gave you and saying yes or no. You're also expanding and improving, hopefully, that recommendation. One example is my agency, the Department of Administration. The fleet, we have about 1,200 cars in the Department of Administration fleet, and it's aging. I mean, I think almost the average mileage is like 150,000 miles, which just is terrible. So, and it's chronically underfunded. And so the agency's like, look, we need something, give us 20 cars. You know, it wasn't much, but as we looked at it, as I looked at it with my director, we said, you know, this is actually a more fundamental chronic problem. Let's actually develop a real solution. And so sometimes what you'll do is you'll take a problem in an agency and develop your own solution that encompasses and fixes the larger problem. So what we came up with was a lease purchase option where we're going to lease cars for 3 to 5 years, and then with the rates and the money we generate from them, we'll end up paying them off at the end of the 5 years, and we'll have an entirely new fleet. And so that's something we recommended this last fall that wasn't really what the agency was asking for, but we almost knew better than what they knew that they
Sure.
needed. And that's one of the neat things about this job that allows you to do that.
Yeah, I was kind of grown when I see an agency budget request that has an even number, like $100,000. It's like, there's no way that costs exactly $100,000. Come on. So then you have to drill down and find out what it actually costs. And in some cases, it costs more, like the.
Sure.
But yeah, in recent years, I have had several experiences where I would ask agencies why they didn't ask for more money. Say, well, you're telling me you have all these problems, why aren't you asking for more money? And they say, well, we just don't think we can get it. And at that point, I mean, what I try to do is I say, well, just you have to at least submit it in your budget, because you're not meeting your statutory requirements and delivering the services that you need to deliver. And we need to know about it, and the legislature needs to know about it if that's not happening. And then it's their decision on whether or not to fund it, obviously. But you need at least to deliver on presenting what you need, which seems like a simple thing to say. But sometimes the culture within agencies is that they think, well, we're not going to get the money anyway, so what's the point? The point is, I mean, we need to make rational decisions, and people need to know what their options are. Even if they decide not to fund it, they need to know what their options are. Let's see. Where am I supposed to point this thing? There? Okay. Yeah.
What's a chronically lowball agency?
I think
Well-
if you ask an agency, they're all.
Yeah, it's true.
And I mean, the reality is we have a pot of money. Everybody thinks their agency is the most important and has the most important functions. What actually is it up for interpretation? I don't know if you.
Well, the Department of Environmental Quality has a program called the WARF program. Well, WARF is an acronym that stands for Water Quality Assurance Revolving Fund. And the Water Quality Assurance Revolving Fund provides funding to clean up hazardous waste sites. So all hazardous waste sites that aren't Superfund sites get covered in Arizona under WARF. And typically what this is either large computer manufacturers that have left, or dry cleaners. So dry cleaners that, like mom and pop organizations that used to just take their equipment out back and hose it off, and all the chemicals just kind of seep into the groundwater. There's, I think, 33 WARF sites around the state and an equal number of potential WARF sites around the state. And cleanup ranges in some cases, there are no cleanups recommended. In some other cases, lots and lots of cleanups recommended, just depending upon the soil content and whether or not it's leaking into bedrock, and kind of delving a little bit further away from my expertise, but in terms of groundwater understanding. But the funding mechanism is from corporate income tax. And traditionally, they would receive 13 to 15 million every year in corporate income tax revenue to this WARF fund, and then the WARF fund would be used by the department to clean up these sites. During the budget downturn, we took that down to 7 million. So we essentially took $8 million away from this fund, diverted it away so that we could balance our state budget. Another important thing important aspect of the entire budget debate is that we have to have a balanced budget at the end of every year. So we took that $8 million and shifted it back to the general fund so that the general fund would balance at the end of the year. And we swept a lot of funds, a lot of money from a lot of different agency funds. So this was not unique to this agency. However, the Department of Environmental Quality has since requested a reinstatement of that $8 million every year in order to clean up these sites, because the sites aren't going away. The chemicals are still leaching into the groundwater, and nobody's gone in and cleaned it up independently. It's just the Department of Environmental Quality's purview. So what I've done with the agency is requested more and more information, more detail, and what they've provided is a wealth of information about each of the sites. Last year they gave me maps with all the sites identified, as well as the legislative districts kind of penciled out strategically. And last year, we recommended a reinstatement of the WARF funds, I think $2.5 million a year to get back up to 15 in 3 years. So it would be a gradual phase in. And the reason for that is that it's cheaper than just giving them $7 million or an additional $8 million every year. This year, we were unable to recommend it because of things like CPS. Like CPS caseload competes directly with WARF funding. So that's another piece of the budget puzzle, really. So in answer to your question, DEQ would say they're chronically underfunded. And depending upon how you see the WARF program and whether or not you think that this is a worthy thing to be spending state money on, you may think so too. Personally, I think so. I recommend it. But because of competing interests.
All right, so continuing on with the calendar, things will shift in January once the executive budget is published. The executive budget really, in a lot of ways, it really sets the agenda, I guess, of the session as far as the budget goes. Because what will happen is in January, like we've already mentioned, JLBC will produce their baseline budget, and then we'll go about comparing, sometimes arguing. The JLBC baseline won't have policy issues or caseloads. Our executive budget does. And so when you are comparing those two, we have to work out the numbers, wrangle a little bit with that. Some other things you may be required to do, and probably will be required to do during session, is testify at appropriation committee hearings. Every week for about 4 weeks, the major agencies will go to appropriations committees and talk about their requests and the executive's recommendations for those requests. A lot of times analysts will attend those and possibly speak at them. Analysts are also going to assist in agencies in preparing for those budget hearings and meet with individual legislators. Just last week, I think I had a meeting with 2 different legislators explaining the recommendations for my policy areas kind of in more detail because a lot of times legislators, most of the time, they're not experts on budget or policy areas, and it's really up to you to explain that to them. We'll also sometimes and oftentimes brief specific groups of legislators. In Arizona, right now, the Democrats are the minority. So, for example, I think this year and last year, we briefed the House Democrats as a whole on the budget.
Yeah, and sometimes politics plays into that. I remember last year we were going over to the legislature and somebody said we should break it up into a couple different groups because if somebody saw the governor's entire budget office going to just talk to the Democrats, it could look bad. So we broke it up a little bit, I think. And throughout March and through May, and if you're lucky, not June, we provide support during budgetary negotiations. So what happens is, as Ken mentioned, the executive budget's really where we start the discussion. So we have the executive budget on one side and the JLBC baseline budget. And we take those two things, set them together, find the differences, and then start talking about the different policy directions that each organization wants to go in. And depending on the year, these budget negotiations go on usually through April, sometimes into May and June, especially during the downturn. In 9, 10, and 11, we were there until June every year, and it was knock down, drag out. The first year, I think we stayed until like 4 in the morning a couple nights. It hasn't been so bad lately, though.
No.
But at the moment, our office talks with JLBC about every week and starts discussions. We develop, believe it or not, Excel spreadsheets and make comments on those and explain the differences when we iron out all the details. And I think this year, it gets better every year. Our relationship with the Joint Legislative Budget Committee has gotten a lot better recently. And we talk very frequently with them, ask them questions about what their recommendations are and what their assumptions are to get the calculations. And then there's the dark, smoky room where one side sits down one side and the other side sits down the other side. And the cool thing about being an analyst is you can go to those meetings. I've requested to go to those meetings because I think it's awesome. Just to be in there and to see the personalities, because you read about personalities in the paper and you hear about it on the news as you're driving into work. And yeah, that's one of the, I think, the more exciting things about our office. And here I've just included a general overview of the state's general fund budget. This is from fiscal 14, so the fiscal year we're currently in. And just to highlight, kind of going back to whether or not an agency is chronically underfunded or not, state government does three main things: incarceration, medication, and education. And it's shown here. I mean, K-12 education is 42%. Universities are 8%, so that's half your budget. Prisons are 11%. State Medicaid match is 23%. There's another more than a quarter. So what do you have left to work with? Knock another 4% off for debt service, got 12%. And during the downturn, that's where most of the cuts were made. Just to give a sense of how things operate.
And just
Where
keep
the
in
money-
mind, this is just the general fund portion.
Right.
I mean,
There's another
thousands of funds.
Another, what is it, 20
28
billion? Yeah.
something like that. All right, so right now what we're doing in the office is we're tracking and evaluating legislation. There'll be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 bills that are introduced in the Senate and the House. And it's up to the OSPB analyst to analyze that legislation. You get assigned pieces of legislation based on your policy areas. So for example, right now, I would be taking all the bills related to insurance, the bills related to any kind of state worker issue, and other random bills. I have the veterinary board, so I'll take all the bills that relate to animals and things like that. So this is an opportunity to really delve into an area of policy and become kind of an expert about things that you might not normally become an expert on. I would have no interest ever in learning about insurance policy. But because I have 30 bills this session that deal with insurance policy, I am forced to learn it, which down the road, it's probably a great skill. And this tracking and monitoring legislation is a great opportunity to research and learn those skills. So what will happen is we do something called an enactment comment, where for each bill that gets signed and goes to the governor, it's our opportunity to create an enactment comment to brief really the governor's staff on the fiscal and policy impacts of that legislation. And it's an important document for our director to understand what's coming down the pipeline, bad legislation from our office's point of view that needs to be vetoed. We'll actually get a chance to recommend to the governor or to our boss if a piece of legislation should be vetoed or not. It's a pretty neat opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Generally, all that kind of pertains to more nuts and bolts operational stuff. We don't really comment too much on policy, more the bigger policy issues, like if there's a headline about a bill in Arizona, we stay out of that. Yeah. And during the summer, we provide budget and planning instructions and software to agencies. So we have our own budgeting software that we provide to all the state agencies. It's based on Microsoft Access, and when you look at it the first time, it's kind of clunky, but it works pretty well for us. We also have bill tracking software that we use because there, like Ken mentioned, there's 1,800 bills, something like that. It's a lot to go through and weed through, especially when things are happening every day and bills are moving. As it's a part-time legislature, everything moves pretty quickly once the legislature is actually in session. We train agency personnel in our systems and our processes, and what I do is I when I talk to one of my smaller agencies, or if I have a new agency, I explain before they submit their budget what I look for when I get a budget request. Say, well, if you say you need $60,000 to hire somebody, I want to see all of it. I want to see the calculation that you did to get there. I want to know when you're going to hire them. I want to know if there's vacancy savings from other staff members that you mentioned. I need to know exactly what that number is, which, like as MPAs, you understand the need for that, but not everybody does. We assist agencies in developing their budget requests, as I just talked about, evaluate state agency fees, and we do special projects. So if throughout either the budget development or through the legislative session, you find something that you come across in one of your agencies or one of your areas that you think, hey, I would really like to know a lot more about this. This is interesting to me. I think this would be useful for our agency. Then you go to the director and say, hey, I want to do this as one of my special projects. And generally, he's pretty amenable to everything. And he also has ideas for all of us to do projects that he wants done throughout the summer. And vacation, obviously. Because this is the slower season for us. It's the end of the fiscal year. There's a few things that we do throughout the summer, but none of it's anything that's really going to obstruct vacation. So this is traditionally when everybody takes their majority of their 4 weeks vacation. Just to reiterate, 4 weeks vacation.
And you go north.
Yeah. Also, the best
It's a
time to
great
be
time
out of
to get out.
Arizona because it's pretty hot in
That's your
July
winter.
through October.
Yeah, I mean, one analyst in particular will sometimes take an entire month off, and that's probably okay during the summer.
Sure.
So,
No, I've
yeah.
taken 3 weeks at a time.
Is there like an OSPD retreat?
No.
No.
There should be, but
I mean,
there's not.
that kind of led me to think, though, that during the summer, not an official retreat, but we take trips.
That's true. We do.
go on visits. Last summer, we visited the prisons. I mean, it doesn't sound great. But,
No, yeah. Also, last summer I went to a water treatment plant in July, which don't go to a water treatment plant in July.
yeah.
Speaking of visits, as you just said, do you guys ever do like site visits for agencies
Absolutely.
and then some of the
all
policy
time. During the
spaces?
summer, our assistant director especially is always just like, get out there with
Okay.
your
Yeah.
agencies, get to know them, do what you can.
Yeah, because once we get our agency's submittals, you'll probably go out to the agency itself and sit down and ask them to explain either their budget or their budget request to you. And then you'll take that into consideration as you're developing your recommendations. But yeah, the summer is the best time to learn more about your agencies and go out and see what they do firsthand. And we went on a lot of good, I did the prison trip, which, like you said, it's pretty interesting.
What else have we done? We visited the biosphere at U of A. It's like this self-contained environment. I don't know how to explain. Have you seen the movie
Biodome, yeah.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
basically what it is. It was pretty incredible. I know if you have liquor, the Department of Liquor, you can go on liquor enforcement trips with the agents.
Ride-alongs?
Ride-alongs, especially around ASU around September. You can
Right.
get a lot of people. So things like that.
Yeah, I had the universities last year as one of my agency or policy areas, and we went up north because there's 3 universities in Arizona. There's Arizona State, University of Arizona, and Northern Arizona University. So I went to all the universities to take a look at what their capital systems were like, because each of the universities, or the university system, the Board of Regents, has an entire capital system that they manage. And one of our focuses this year and last year was to look at the state's capital infrastructure, see what we needed, and see how bad everything is. Turns out everything's really bad, and the buildings are all falling apart.
Really, really bad, yeah.
Took tours of each of the universities and looked in like one of the main buildings for each, and you'd see all of their water systems and their electrical systems are more than 50 years old. And what that means is they don't make parts for any of these anymore. It's going to be really expensive to replace it all, and donors don't like giving to replace infrastructure, unfortunately. They like doing things like building wonderful rooms like this.
So there are a few things we do all year round. Of course, as an analyst, you're supposed to continuously monitor the operations of state agencies and budgets. Be there to listen to the problems when they come up. Be there to give advice. We also publish revenue and expenditure estimates for hundreds of funds each month. I don't. How many funds are there?
It's like
About
2,000, I think.
There's about 2,000 funds in the state of Arizona.
And we get cash flow statements on probably 75% of those
Right.
every month
And
that
so-
are,
Yeah.
it's pretty streamlined now. We used to get Excel documents emailed to us every month. Yeah.
It's a little better now.
But now we've got an automated system, so you can actually go to our website and find individual funds. And most of them are updated pretty
Yeah.
frequently.
And so it's really on a rolling basis year round. It's up to us to kind of make sure that cash flow is going to balance out. And then, of course, we monitor changes to federal spending and its effects on state programs. Of course, with the sequester recently, that last fall, that was a big
The shutdown.
headache for our office. Yep. And the
Yeah,
shutdown.
because a week before that, we talked to all of our agencies and we're like, okay, well, if this happens, what's going to happen to you guys? I mean,
Right.
who's going to have to be laid off? Who's not going to get paid? What's going to happen to what's going to happen to operations?
Yeah, and then there are several agencies at the state level that depend heavily on federal spending.
Mhm.
So for those analysts, it became quite a task.
Right. And even then, it gets down to cash flow because some agencies would say, we just got our payment in, so we'll be good for 3 weeks. If it goes longer than 3 weeks, then we're in trouble.
There was
And then others
talk about
say, yeah, we got our grant last month, we're fine throughout the rest of the year. If it lasts through May, then we're really like, well, if it lasts through May, I think
Yeah.
we've got bigger problems.
We had the whole shut down the Grand Canyon fiasco.
Yeah.
That was fun. And our analysts went crazy for a few weeks, but it worked out.
And throughout the year, we advise and assist the governor during emergencies like the shutdown and unexpected events. We review all agency communications with the legislature. It really depends on the agency, but traditionally when the legislature asks for any kind of information, it goes through either our office or a higher pay grade than our office. So you'll review a lot of communications, like your budget director for one of your agencies will say, hey, I got this request for information. Here's the information. Will you read it and make sure that it's okay? When that happens the first few times, I always would take it to an assistant director or the director and say, hey, this is what's happening. Legislature wants to know X about Z. Is this okay? And usually they say, yes, obviously. In some cases they say, okay, most of that's okay, but get them to change this, this, and this. Because they're executive agencies, it all has to run through us. And anticipate problems, take or recommend corrective action. I think we've talked quite a bit about that.
Yeah. All right. So, I think the bottom line, I think one key takeaway from what we've explained today is that OSPB analysts, not only is it a great place to start your career, but OSPB analysts are really in high demand.
Mm-hmm.
We're considered a great source, and we're considered in many ways an expert, and we're at a place in state government, high level, that most people don't get. Agencies, directors, former analysts, they all realize this. And it's a great place to start your career and move on from. The skills and experience you're going to gain at OSPB are really unmatched,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue. Just the access and the level of trust that's placed in you really is incredible.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about working there is that sometimes I'll be driving home and listening to NPR and hearing them discuss local politics and things like CPS and what's going to happen with CPS, and I'll already know what's going to happen with CPS because I have that access, and I've literally been in those meetings. Like last year, the biggest thing in Arizona, the big topic was Medicaid and whether or not Arizona was going to expand Medicaid and get the higher federal match. And I was in the first meeting with the governor and with Access, the state's Medicaid systems analyst, where we discussed, okay, yeah, it looks like this is going to save us money and we don't really have a choice. And it looks like this is the best move for Arizona. It wasn't when she made the decision, but it was the first time that we kind of saw, okay, this might actually happen, which was pretty crazy. That, I mean, she's going to buck her party and go in a totally different direction. But I think it was the right decision. She thinks it was the right decision. Really was the right decision, I think. Are there any questions? Yes.
Well, considering you took that year off, and it's unusual to not have that 5 years and get out type of,
Sure.
but have you been offered or been looked at by somebody?
Yeah, when the DES analyst left in November, and my boss asked me to do a lot of work, I told him I'd stay through the end of this legislative session. And since then, I've had a few people ask about me. And that's not unusual. I mean, lots of people in our office have had, if not offers, people at different agencies asking about them.
Have you sought additional training while you were there, like in other fields, or is it just the on-the-job stuff that they can't resist?
It's mostly the on-the-job stuff that they can't resist.
I would argue that it's probably all the training. If this is what you're interested in, this is probably all the training you need. I mean, as far as budget analysis.
Yeah, because you see
fiscal
how
analysis.
these arguments for additional funding are made to the governor, and what you understand what our office is looking for. You understand what the legislative office is looking for. You understand a lot about the players in politics, as well as people like the comptroller, directors of different agencies. You're on a first name basis with a lot of these people pretty quickly. Yeah, the access is just...
I mean, on a weekly basis with my agencies, I talk to the state chief information officer, the state comptroller, the state benefits manager, and the state HR director daily. I mean, on a first name basis. I feel like I could talk to them about anything. So it's access like that that's pretty great.
But yeah, at the same time, there are a lot of different things you can do in order to continue. I mean, there's networking opportunities in Arizona. I know Maxwell has a group in Phoenix. There are a couple different leadership societies that offer training throughout the year. Like there's one called Valley Leadership that I'm actually going to apply for this year because it'd be a great networking opportunity, and I think I could learn a lot from that organization. There are a few different leadership foundations that do the same type of training. And there's a community college and a major university also in downtown Phoenix and in the outlying areas. If you feel like you need additional education post-Maxwell.
Is that subsidized in any way?
I don't think there are no tuition reimbursement programs
I don't think so.
at our office, no. But in some state agencies there are. Trying to think which ones those are. Yeah.
So since you're both Maxwell grads, I
Yeah.
have to ask, what is maybe your favorite course that you took with you, or favorite course that you found useful on a daily basis from here?
Well, obviously budgeting is helpful. I didn't know that was necessarily the career path I was going to take. That and forecasting. Incredibly helpful.
I would agree. I didn't think I was going to go into budgeting when I took the budgeting class over the summer. But that's maybe not half, but quite a bit of what we do was all the basic stuff that you do in the budgeting class here. I think the economics for public management was fantastic as well. I had Will Coxon, who's great. Statistics as well was very useful. And then public finance, I had Rubenstein, I think. And that was a very good class, lots of very useful information that I used. And actually, I was thinking about it the other day, and one class that I really didn't like when I was here it was one of the seminars in the summer, the leadership seminar, I think,
Yeah, right.
that I thought was, at the time, I didn't really see the purpose of it. But now I'm 6 years into my career, and you realize how useful that is. Just, yeah, which was really surprising because at the time I was like, obviously this is all true. I mean, it all seemed very simplistic to me, but it's really not. Like, it was a very useful class, and it just took a while to kick in.
With that being said, I didn't take a ton of finance budget type classes when I was here, and I don't think that's hurt me in my career right now.
No,
So I don't think
Nor
it's
did I.
a prerequisite or something. You need to be taking budget and finance classes. I took a lot of environmental type policy, economics classes.
yeah, when I was here, I did an internship at Syracuse Symphony Orchestra because I wanted to go into arts nonprofit administration. And I still do, maybe in 10 years, I just don't want to go in at the entry point that a lot of them require. I'd rather go in at more of a management level, which is tough to get because you've got all these other people who have gone through the ranks and have done the work for 15 years. But I'm very happy with state government at the moment, and work with a lot of really wonderful people, a lot of very dedicated employees.
You guys like living in Phoenix? I mean,
Yeah, you missed that part.
Oh, yeah.
Beginning. It was really cool, yeah.
Just
Go back to that.
Yeah, go back a little bit.
If you go to the beginning, it's kind of a
Yeah,
punishment.
this is really, I mean, this is probably the highlight of the entire presentation.
Well, I'm biased.
Quick review.
I mean, I grew up in the Southwest, so
Oh, we're
Okay,
at.
where?
San Diego, so not
Oh,
exactly
yeah.
Phoenix, but
I'm from Phoenix.
Okay.
I love Phoenix. I didn't always love Phoenix, but I do now. So
It's literally today's night. So.
yep.
I was in shorts and a shirt on Sunday having a lunch in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, it's not similar to San Diego, it's its own thing.
Right.
But and there's lots of outdoor activities, lots of really great scenery as you're from there. Road trips to San Diego.
there you go.
This is really, I think, the highlight of all of it. Cost of living is so much cheaper than the rest of the country. And for what you get, I mean, you have all these sports teams, you've got really wonderful culture. It's really easy to get around. I live 10 minutes from the office, which is difficult in any other place. I mean, a lot of our office lives in the outlying suburbs, and they drive an hour.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
45
I don't
minutes an
understand
hour.
why you would want to do that.
Our director drives about 45 minutes an hour. Yeah, and I'm a transplant. I've been there since '09, and you know, the summers are summers. They're
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, it's
but,
hot, but you don't have to shovel anything.
Winners are winners here.
Yeah.
You just take it, and
Right.
I learned to love it. It's really a great area. It's got everything you could really want, I think, in a metro area. Though, and of course, the winters are amazing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's beautiful right now.
Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you for.
Thank you so much for having
Thank
us.
you.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you.
Well, that's all there.
Thank you.
Yeah.